Snow drifted across the windshield in thin, frantic streaks, blurring the world into a wash of gray and white as I turned onto the final stretch of Cold Ridge Highway. I had driven 5 hours through a winter storm for this. One more chance at Christmas. One more chance at belonging. My trunk was full of wrapped gifts, each chosen carefully, each one a small gesture toward a family that had always kept me just outside the inner circle. I told myself this year might be different. I told myself Sienna would smile when she opened the necklace I'd picked for her, that Mom would love the cashmere scarf, that Dad might finally soften even for a moment. But the moment I stepped out of the car, the cold bit into my face and my phone lit up with a new message. 8 words. That was all it took to knock the breath out of me. Don't come inside. This year is just for immediate family. Sienna. Immediate family. As if I hadn't been born here. As if I'd been a visitor in my own life. I looked up at the glowing windows of the Langford house, golden and warm through the falling snow. The dining room was bright, the long table already set. I could see silhouettes moving inside, my mom smoothing the table runner, my dad adjusting his tie, Sienna brushing a hand through her perfect hair. And right at my old seat, the one I'd taken every Christmas for nearly 2 decades, I saw a man leaning back in the chair like he belonged there. Elias Monroe, her fiancé. My spot, the space that had always been mine, was gone, replaced without hesitation. I tightened my grip on my keys. The snow fell harder. My breath turned to ice in the air. And somewhere between the headlights and the cold and that one text message, something inside me cracked clean through. I didn't move for a long moment. The storm howled softly around me, whispering in the way winter sometimes does when it knows you're hanging by a thread. My boots sank into the powder as I took a few slow steps toward the porch, then stopped again. Through the dining room window, I watched my family like a stranger watching a staged play. Dad lifted a glass, shoulders stiff with pride. Mom hovered close to him, smiling too brightly. And Sienna, radiant and soft in a cream sweater, laughed at something Elias murmured in her ear. They looked perfect, like the town's postcard version of a family Christmas, a picture that didn't have space for me. My phone vibrated again, a second message from Sienna. Please don't make this weird. We promised Elias's parents it would be intimate. Intimate? A word so sharp it might as well have been a blade. I stood there in the swirling snow, my fingers numb, watching the people who once called me theirs gather around a table I had helped set every year growing up. The kind of table where we'd placed gingerbread cookies when I was little, the kind where I learned how to fold napkins just like Mom liked. None of that mattered tonight. I wasn't needed. I wasn't even wanted. A wave of humiliation rolled through me, thick, hot, and dizzying. I felt it rise from my stomach to my throat, a burn I couldn't swallow down. For years, I had been the responsible one, the level-headed one, the one who sent birthday cards early and remembered anniversaries and tried, always tried, to keep the family connected. But Sienna was the one who shone brighter, the one who fit the image, the one Mom and Dad always instinctively moved toward like plants leaning into sunlight. The headlights of a passing truck broke the moment. I blinked hard, grounding myself, and looked away from the window. I turned toward my car and reached for the door handle, only for another sound to pull my attention back toward the house. A faint clink, crystal against crystal, a toast. Dad's voice carried across the yard even through the storm, confident, proud, the tone he reserved for celebrations. I had never heard him use it for me. My throat tightened. I slid into the driver's seat and let the silence wash over me. The gifts lay in the back, wrapped with care, ribboned and labeled. For a moment, the scent of peppermint and pine filled the car from the candle I'd bought earlier in the day. Everything was ready for a holiday that no longer existed. A Christmas that had excluded me before I even reached the driveway. I gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead. Snowflakes melted on the windshield, leaving streaks that caught the streetlight in fractured patterns. I didn't notice I'd started to shake until a sob rose uninvited, and I had to clamp a hand over my mouth. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want them to have that power. But the pain was sharp and immediate, the kind that punctures rather than bruises. For a moment, I let myself remember what holidays used to feel like. The cinnamon rolls Mom baked every Christmas morning, the way Dad used to help us carve jokes into the gingerbread cookies, Sienna and I making snow angels in the backyard. But those memories felt borrowed now, like they belonged to someone else, a girl who once believed she belonged in a family that was slowly pushing her out. A soft buzz broke the silence. A notification lit up on the console. Another message, but not from Sienna. Rachel Porter, my co-worker. Her text flashed across the screen. The Crestwell Capital file. You were right. Call me Monday. I stared at it, confused. Crestwell Capital. The same company Elias worked for. I'd flagged discrepancies months ago, transactions that didn't add up, numbers too polished to be real. But I let it go because it felt too close to my family, to the deal Dad bragged about securing with them. My chest tightened in a different way, a cold, clean jolt of recognition. Was it coincidence? Or had Sienna told me not to come because tonight wasn't really a celebration? Because something darker was happening inside that house? Something I wasn't supposed to see? I turned toward the glowing windows again. The room was bright, almost too bright, as if they were all performing for someone. Dad raised a glass. Sienna leaned into Elias. Mom's posture was perfect, every movement careful. It didn't look like a Christmas dinner. It looked like a negotiation frozen in holiday wrapping paper. I wiped my eyes and forced myself to look away. The storm thickened, making the edges of everything blur like a watercolor someone had spilled water over. I picked up my phone, hoping to see a second message from Sienna, maybe even an apology. There was nothing. Just the cold glow of the screen and the bitter echo of her earlier words. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine hummed low, steady, grounding. My headlights cut through the falling snow, illuminating the house one last time. I pulled away slowly, watching the glowing windows shrink in my rearview mirror until they disappeared into a wall of white. The farther I drove, the clearer my mind became. The humiliation didn't fade. It sharpened. It turned into clarity, the kind that feels like a blade pressed against your ribs. If they didn't want me there, I wouldn't force myself into a place that no longer had a seat for me. But I also wasn't going to let their choices swallow me whole. My car rolled past the final curve of Cedar Ridge Road, and for the first time all night, the storm eased. The world ahead was still dark, but it was open, wide, waiting. And somewhere between the anger, the grief, and the truth settling into my bones, one realization rose clean and undeniable. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. And I wasn't going to let that be the end of my story. I drove until the house and its golden lights were nothing but a memory behind me, and the long black road ahead felt like the only honest path I had left. The snow thickened so fast it turned the world into a moving blur, swallowing the road and the edges of every passing tree. I gripped the wheel tighter than I meant to, trying to steady my breath and the shaking that had nothing to do with the cold. Sienna's message kept replaying in my head like someone pressing rewind over and over. It's just immediate family this year. A sentence so short, so clean, so deliberate that it sliced right through me. My headlights carved pale tunnels through the storm, and every mile felt like another piece of something warm inside me cracking off. Immediate family. As if I hadn't spent Christmases in that same living room since I could walk. As if I hadn't held Sienna's hand the night she was scared Santa would forget our street. As if I hadn't been there for every crisis, every birthday, every time Dad's temper made her cry. And now I was just... what? An optional extra? A seasonal guest? A name that didn't fit the picture she wanted to paint? The betrayal hit deeper than I expected. I kept driving even though a part of me wanted to pull over and scream into the empty snowstorm. My phone buzzed again. For a moment I thought maybe Sienna had changed her mind. But no. It was Dad. Just saw your message. Roads are bad. Stay safe tonight. Stay safe. No invitation, no apology, no... Why aren't you here? Just stay safe. I put the phone face down and let the silence swallow me again. Mini hook. I didn't know yet that the next message I'd read that night would change everything. By the time I crossed the county line, the snow had shifted from harsh flakes to a kind of soft, floating mist, like the storm had exhausted itself all at once. I slowed down as the familiar lights of Coldridge appeared through the haze. A normal person might have driven home, crawled into bed, wrapped themselves in blankets, and avoided thinking about family for the rest of the night. But I wasn't built that way. Pain didn't make me retreat. It made me sharpen. And I wanted answers. Instead of turning toward my apartment, I pulled into a dimly lit gas station. The place was dead quiet, just a single pickup truck idling at the far pump with no driver in sight. I parked under a flickering light and let the silence settle for a moment. Then I picked up my phone. The lock screen glowed with notifications, none from Sienna, none from Dad. But there was one from an unknown number. I frowned and tapped it open. You don't know what you're walking into. I stared at the words, my pulse spiking. It felt like ice water poured down my back. The message had been sent 20 minutes earlier, right after Sienna told me to stay away. Who was this? What did they know? What was I walking into? The gas station heater hummed softly behind me, but I barely heard it. With my fingers cold and trembling, I opened my laptop. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. Something to anchor myself, or maybe something to distract me from the ache in my chest. Instead, I found the spark. I logged into the internal compliance database, more out of habit than intent. It was supposed to be a quick glance, a routine check. But when my dashboard loaded, the first thing I saw made my stomach drop. A flagged alert, something I hadn't seen before. Vendor variance detected. Crestwell Consulting, discrepancy exceeds threshold. I blinked. Crestwell. My family's miracle partner. The same financial group Dad had bragged about for months. The same one Sienna's fiancé Elias worked for. The same one I'd already had a bad feeling about but kept to myself to avoid another family fight. I clicked the alert. A cluster of invoices appeared, consulting fees, vendor contracts, restructuring payments. The numbers looked off. Too clean, too symmetrical, like someone had smoothed them down so well they no longer looked real. My breath caught. Someone had manipulated these, and not subtly. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the soft rattle of sleet on the car roof. Then I opened the oldest file and scrolled to the signatures. My heart stopped. 2 signatures sat at the bottom, Elias Ford, Marcus Langford, Dad and Elias, together. Except, Dad never signed anything electronically. He hated digital approvals. He refused to use DocuSign, always insisting on pen and paper. So this signature, this perfect digital copy of his name. This is fake, I whispered. The realization hit so fast I physically jerked. Someone had forged Dad's signature on a Crestwell contract, and whoever did it wanted Langford development tied to whatever Crestwell was doing. But why? A noise startled me. Boots crunching outside my car door. I snapped my head up, heart in my throat. The pickup truck engine had shut off. A tall figure was walking toward the small convenience store. Just a stranger. Just a man buying drinks. My pulse steadied. Mini hook. For a moment I wondered if I was losing my mind. But then the next file loaded, and everything got worse. I clicked another invoice. More discrepancies, more perfect forged signatures, more money flowing through Crestwell to dummy vendors, shell companies with names so generic they screamed fraud, Norcrest Advisors, Redwood Strategy Group, Enterprise One. I checked the addresses. 2 didn't exist. 1 belonged to a mailbox inside a UPS store. Someone at Crestwell had built a full laundering network, and they were using my father's company as a funnel. I leaned back in the seat, breath tight. How did Dad not see this? How did Sienna never question what her fiancé did for a living? How was I the only one seeing the cracks in the perfect image my family worshipped? The pain of being excluded from Christmas dinner was still raw, but something else rose above it now, something sharper, more urgent. They didn't leave me out because they forgot me. They left me out because something was happening behind those glowing windows that I wasn't supposed to see. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You should have stayed away. My stomach twisted. I typed back before I could stop myself. Who is this? No answer. I tried calling the number. Voicemail. No name. No clue. The message could have been a prank. Or a warning. Or worse. Someone inside Crestwell realizing I was sniffing too close to the truth. I stared at the snow collecting on the windshield. If someone was watching me, I couldn't see them. But the pickup truck was still parked. The store lights flickered. Every sound felt too loud. I shut my laptop abruptly. Instinct took over. Get out of the open, get somewhere safe. I turned the key and pulled back onto the road, heading not toward home, but deeper into town, toward my parents' street. I wasn't going inside, I just needed to see the house. When I reached Ashwood Lane, the storm had cleared enough for the Christmas lights to glow in neat rows along the rooftops. The Langford house stood bright and warm, the windows golden with firelight. And through the living room window, I saw them, Dad, Mom, Sienna, Elias, all sitting together around the table, laughing. My old seat, empty for years, was filled by him, the forge, the liar, the man whose signature sat on every dirty Crestwell document I'd just opened. I watched them raise glasses, watched Sienna lean into him the way she used to lean into me when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. For a moment I couldn't breathe, not because they excluded me, not because they replaced me, but because now I understood why. If I had been at that table, I might have noticed something. A detail, a slip, a look, a document sitting on a counter, a conversation too guarded. Excluding me wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. My phone buzzed. One new message. Dad, we miss you, kiddo. Merry Christmas. My vision blurred for a second. Not from tears, but from something colder. I turned off my engine and sat in the dark, watching light flicker across faces I used to trust. And somewhere between the ache in my chest and the anger digging into my ribs, something new settled inside me. Not rage, not heartbreak, clarity. This wasn't just a family betrayal. This was a setup, a cover, a crime. And if they thought pushing me away would keep me silent, they had underestimated me again. Because now I wasn't hurt, I was awake, and I wasn't walking away this time. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and stale heat, the kind that clings to your clothes long after you leave. I didn't remember pulling into the lot or walking up the stairwell. My mind had been buzzing too loud, my chest too tight. Somehow I'd ended up here, staring at the beige walls like they might answer the questions unraveling in my head. I dropped my bag on the bed and pulled out my laptop again. The screen glow lit up the dim room, and with it, the dread I'd been holding back surged forward. I opened the same Crestwell files. The numbers stared back like an accusation. Someone forged Dad's signature, someone laundered money through shell vendors. Someone wanted the Langford name tied to all of it, and that someone was close enough to be sitting at my family's Christmas dinner. I took a shaky breath and opened a fresh document, something I never created unless I sensed danger. A risk log. I typed the first line. Potential financial misconduct. Crestwell, Langford Development Connection. Possible internal collaborator, Elias Ford. I sat back, staring at the screen. The words felt heavier than truth usually does. Mini hook. I didn't know that while I was typing those lines, someone else was already watching me type them. When my phone buzzed, the vibration felt sharp against the quiet. I grabbed it quickly, hoping, stupidly, it might be Dad or even Sienna trying to fix the disaster of the evening. But it was my colleague Nora. I heard about your dashboard flag. Did you trigger that manually? No, I hadn't. Which meant the system had popped the alert automatically. That only happened under one condition. The amount of money moving through a vendor exceeded the legal threshold. My pulse quickened. I typed back, I didn't trigger it. Can you check if the file was modified recently? Nora responded almost instantly. Modified at 7:42 p.m. Unknown user. right around the time I was sitting outside my parents' window watching them toast with Elias. I felt a cold prickling down the back of my neck. Someone had gone into those files minutes before I saw the alert. Someone inside Crestwell realized the numbers were about to become visible and tried to bury them. But they were sloppy. Sloppy enough that the system caught it, flagged it, and pushed it right to my dashboard. Good. Let them be sloppy. It made my job easier. I closed the chat and dug deeper. The more documents I opened, the clearer the pattern became. Crestwell moved money to Hartford Consulting, an entity with no employees, no office, no digital footprint. From there, money traveled to Langford Development through consulting fees, emergency restructuring, and asset reallocation. Fancy words for, we're using your company as a laundering chute. Dad wasn't a financial expert, he never pretended to be. He built his business with blueprints and calloused hands. He believed in people who shook his hand firmly and looked him in the eye. People like Elias. My jaw tightened. He trusted a man who could forge his signature with the same smooth precision he used to pour wine at Christmas dinner. The motel heater kicked on with a loud rattle. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back. Every part of me was tired, hurt, angry. But beneath all of that was something steadier, something sharper, resolve. Then my phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail from Sienna. I hesitated before pressing play. Her voice came through shaky, hushed, panicked. "Where are you? Why didn't you come home? Elias said you left because you were upset. Mom's worried. Call back." She sounded clueless, blind, still buried in the world he'd created for her. I wanted to scream, "Shake yourself awake, Sienna." But her voice cracked at the end in a way that softened me. She didn't know she was part of something dangerous. She didn't know she'd been used. But she was going to learn. I saved the voicemail. Proof mattered now. Proof of who knew what and when. Before I could return her call, my laptop chimed. A system alert. Another red flag. Transaction discrepancy. Crestwell, Hartford. Vendor, North Lane Strategies. $280,000 moved the day before Christmas Eve. 2 signatures. Elias Ford, Marcus Langford. Except Dad was in Denver that day. I knew because he'd sent Sienna and me a picture of his flight delay, complaining about cold coffee at the airport. The signature was forged again. It was intentional, it was repeated, it was systematic. Someone was setting up my father's company as the fall guy. My chest tightened as I wrote another entry in my log. If Crestwell implodes, Langford Development will be blamed first. I stared at the line until the words blurred. Then I added, "This is bigger than a mistake. This is a scheme." A knock sounded on the motel wall. Just the guest next door, maybe shifting furniture. But I jolted anyway. My nerves were shot. I needed air. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The cold hit instantly, slicing through fabric and right into bone. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked toward the far end of the parking lot. The town lights glowed faintly in the distance, like they were trying to reach me through the storm. I leaned against the metal railing, staring at the white-out sky, and let myself feel what I'd been pushing down. This wasn't just data. This wasn't just fraud. This was my family, their business, their reputation, their safety. And none of them even knew the storm that was forming above their heads. Mini-hook. Then my phone vibrated again, this time with a message that made my entire body go cold. Stop digging. No signature, no number I recognized. Just those 2 words. I scanned the empty parking lot. The wind howled against the metal siding. For the first time that night, fear pricked through the resolve. I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. Seconds stretched. A full minute passed. Nothing. I forced myself back into the room, locking the door behind me. The motel walls suddenly felt too thin, the lock too flimsy. It was one thing to find forged signatures. It was another thing entirely to receive threats. Someone knew I was digging. Someone knew I had connected the dots. Someone was watching. My mind went back to the silhouette I'd glimpsed in the suburban street earlier. the faint glow of a cigarette near the row of pine trees across from my parents' house. I had dismissed it as nothing. Maybe it wasn't nothing. I sat down again, hands trembling, and opened my email. I typed fast. Subject: urgent. Need to review Crestwell files. Lisa, something is wrong. The vendor patterns, the signatures, the money flows. None of it lines up. It's worse than we thought. Call me first thing Monday. I hovered over send, then hit it before fear could stop me. It wasn't enough. I started downloading all the implicated documents, saving them to an encrypted flash drive. Then I printed the top 3 files, the ones with Dad's pasted signatures, and slid them into the folder I kept for urgent field cases. Not because I wanted to show him tonight, but because if something happened to my laptop, I needed physical proof. The heater rattled on again. It was almost midnight. Snow piled against the window. The storm raged, but inside my thoughts were clearer than ever. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a harmless corporate shortcut. This was deliberate, organized, concealed, and my family was in the middle of it. I lay down for a moment, fully clothed, folder resting on my chest, laptop open beside me. The motel pillow smelled like detergent and other people's memories. I stared at the ceiling until the cracks in the plaster blurred. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. But the resolve stayed wide awake, because I knew what tomorrow demanded. I had to confront them, not with anger, not with tears, but with truth. And when the truth hit the Langford house, Christmas would never look the same again. Morning came too fast, a thin gray line slipping through the motel curtains and dragging me awake long before my body was ready. I sat up, still wearing yesterday's clothes, the folder of printed files resting on the nightstand like a silent witness. My neck ached, my eyes burned, and my mind snapped back into motion before I even swallowed my first breath. Today, I wasn't running from the truth. I was walking straight into it. I splashed cold water on my face in the tiny motel bathroom, brushed my hair into something passable, grabbed my laptop, and headed out. A thin layer of snow covered my car, clean and untouched. No footprints near it. That was good. Or maybe bad. I couldn't tell anymore. The road into downtown Denver was nearly empty. Christmas morning always made the city look abandoned, like a set after the actors had left. The silence pressed around me, but inside my chest, everything hummed with tension. By the time I reached the office building, most of the lights were off except for the emergency fixtures casting long shadows across the lobby. I scanned my badge. The lock clicked. I stepped inside. My heels echoed off the tile floor as I made my way to the elevator. The building felt cavernous, like the walls were holding their breath. I rode up to the 9th floor alone. As the elevator doors opened, the familiar smell of printer ink and old carpet hit me, and for the first time, my office didn't feel like a place of work. It felt like a crime scene. I made my way to my desk and powered on my computer. The glow of the monitor illuminated the darkness around me, and I began pulling up the files again, this time with more purpose, more detail, more precision. Every number mattered, every signature mattered, every timestamp. As the documents loaded, I was struck by how neatly the fraud had been engineered. Crestwell had buried their scheme under legitimate bills, clean audits, and tidy consulting write-offs. It was brilliant in a horrifying way, but nothing stays invisible forever. Mini-hook. And today, I found the first crack in the wall. A notification pinged, an internal message from IT security, unusual access detected from external location. Review required. My breath hitched. External location? Last night? I opened the log, my user ID, my dashboard. Accessed at 9:07 p.m. Except at 9:07 p.m., I had been sitting in my motel room watching snow slide down the window. So if it wasn't me, someone had used my credentials. Then I saw it. The IP address. It belonged to Crestwell's downtown office. A sharp shiver crawled up my spine. Someone within Crestwell accessed my profile last night to see what I was looking at, to see what I knew, They weren't just hiding crimes. They were tracking the people who discovered them. I printed the log immediately, adding it to the growing stack of evidence beside me. Then my phone rang. I flinched. The screen displayed a name I almost wished I didn't know. Sienna. I answered cautiously. "Hey!" Her voice came through thin and trembling. "Where are you? You didn't come home last night." "I needed space," I said. "A lot happened." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm calling. Avery, I need to ask you something." "What?" There was a pause. Too long, too heavy. "Elias said you're digging into Crestwell," she finally admitted. "He said you're putting Dad's business at risk. He said you're jealous, and that you're trying to ruin everything." I closed my eyes. Of course he did. This was what manipulators did best. Turn the truth on its head and hand it back like a gift. "Sienna," I said slowly, "he's lying to you." "I don't know what to believe," she whispered. "He's been so good to Dad. He's been good to me." "Sienna," I said more firmly, "I found forged signatures, including Dad's." Silence. "He would never sign the paperwork Crestwell attached his name to," I continued. "He doesn't even use digital signatures. You know that." She stammered. Maybe he forgot." "No," I said. "He didn't forget. Someone forged them because they needed Dad's company to take the fall, and the evidence points straight to Crestwell, straight to Elias." A breath hitched across the line. She whispered, "Why would he do that?" "Because it benefits him," I said gently. "Because if Crestwell collapses, Dad gets blamed first. You get blamed, I get blamed. And Elias walks away clean." She inhaled sharply. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do," I said. "I have the files, and I have proof Crestwell accessed my profile last night to see what I'd uncovered." Sienna didn't respond. I could hear the war inside her, the man she loved versus the truth she didn't want to face. I let her sit with it. After what felt like minutes, she finally spoke. "I'll talk to him," she said. "No," I started, but the line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, dread settling deep in my ribs. If she confronted him without understanding how dangerous he was, she could make herself a target. Mini-hook. I didn't know then that she already was. I took a breath, refocused on my screen, and opened the last batch of ledger files, records Crestwell kept hidden behind encrypted access. It took me 3 tries to crack them open with my compliance override. When the files loaded, I understood why they tried to hide them. They weren't just laundering through shell vendors. They were moving money offshore, millions. Transactions routed through an intermediary bank in the Caymans, then to a holding company, then routed again into personal accounts. One name appeared over and over. Not Dad's, not mine, Elias Ford. There it was, black and white. The whole shape of the fraud laid bare. He'd used my father's company as a shield, then funneled the profits offshore. My hand trembled as I printed the documents. The folder on my desk thickened, evidence of crimes, lies, betrayals. Then footsteps echoed down the hallway. I straightened. No one else was supposed to be here today. The footsteps paused outside my office. "Avery!" The voice hit me like a jolt. "Dad." He stepped inside, looking exhausted, pale, confused. His coat hung open, his eyes shadowed. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I went by your apartment," he said. "Then I drove past the motel. Your car was gone. I got worried." "Dad, you shouldn't be here," I said, standing quickly. "You need to go home." He shook his head. "Not until you tell me what's going on." I hesitated, then handed him the top page, the forged signature. He stared at it, at his name, at the date. A muscle in his jaw jumped. "I didn't sign this." "I know." He looked up at me. "Who did?" "Someone from Crestwell," I said. "Someone who wanted your company tied to their fraud." His face went slack with shock. "And Elias?" he whispered. "He's at the center of it." Dad lowered himself into the chair like the weight was too much to carry. "I trusted him," he said quietly. "I let him into my home." He swallowed hard. His next words cracked. I let him into my family. I sat beside him. I know. Tears gathered in the corners of his eyes. What have I done? You were manipulated, I said softly, but now we fix it. He nodded shakily. What do we do first? Tell the truth, I said, to the people who can stop this. Before we could say anything else, my phone buzzed loudly on the desk. Unknown number. I stared at it, then answered. A male voice spoke on the other end, calm, cold, familiar. You're making a mistake. My blood ran cold. Elias. Dad stiffened. You shouldn't be at the office, Elias continued. That's dangerous. People might misunderstand your intentions. My voice hardened. I understand more than you think. A pause, the sound of a quiet breath. Avery, stop this, he said, before it's too late. Too late for who? I asked. For all of you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, heart racing. Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. What did he say? He knows where we are. Mini hook. And then, I heard it. The elevator ding, light footsteps, a shadow crossing the frosted glass of the hallway. Someone was here, someone who shouldn't be. Dad stood, eyes wide, ready to protect me. I grabbed the folder of documents and whispered, We need to leave. Now. And as we stepped into the hallway, I realized something chilling. The elevator was still open, and the air smelled faintly like cologne. His cologne. The sky over Denver was still dim when I left my apartment the next morning, the clouds hanging low like thick gray wool. The city felt muted, the streets quiet under a thin crust of overnight snow. I held the USB drive in my coat pocket the entire walk from the building to my car, gripping it so tightly my fingers ached. It felt like carrying a secret that had weight, like a stone I couldn't set down. I drove with the heater on high, windows fogged at the corners, trying to steady the sound of my own heartbeat. By the time I reached the attorney's office downtown, the sun had barely crawled above the skyline. The building was tall and modern, its glass facade reflecting the gloomy weather back at itself. I parked in the underground garage, took a deep breath, and headed inside. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor lighting up slowly until the doors finally slid open onto a quiet reception area. The receptionist greeted me with a polite, practiced warmth. "You're here for the 9 o'clock with Mr. Greer?" "Yes," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I expected. She gestured toward a row of chairs, but before I could sit, a man in his 50s stepped into the lobby. He wore a charcoal suit and carried a leather folder under his arm. "Avery Langford?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Daniel Greer. Come on back." His office was spacious, but uncluttered. Bookshelves arranged neatly, degrees framed on the wall, a large window overlooking the city. He gestured for me to sit, then closed the door behind us. "Your message last night said this was urgent," he said as he settled behind his desk. I pulled the USB from my coat pocket and placed it gently on the surface between us. "It is." He studied me for a moment. "Tell me everything." So I did. From the Christmas exclusion to the documents, the discovered shell companies, the altered signatures, the threatened texts, and the evidence in that USB. I told him about Sienna signing papers she didn't understand, about my parents being manipulated, about being framed through falsified approvals in Crestwell's system. He didn't interrupt. He only listened, occasionally jotting notes, occasionally watching me with a look that made me feel both exposed and protected. When I finished, he leaned back slowly. "You have more than a suspicion," he said. "You have evidence. Real evidence." "I don't know who else to trust," I said quietly. "It's bigger than I thought, and it's touching my family from every direction." He tapped his pen against the folder thoughtfully. "It's fortunate you came now. If you had waited, the accusations could have turned toward you before you even saw it coming." I swallowed. "I think that's already happening." He clicked open the USB folder, scanning the documents. His brows lifted. Whoever compiled this wanted someone to see it. This isn't sloppiness or panic, this is intentional. That's what scares me, I said. It should. He paused. But it also means you have a strong foundation for a whistleblower claim. The words felt heavy in the air. Whistleblower. I had spent years avoiding the spotlight, working quietly, doing my job methodically, never stepping into the line of fire. Becoming a whistleblower felt like stepping in front of a train willingly. What happens if I file? I asked. You gain legal protection, Greer said, and depending on the depth of this scheme, the government may shield your identity during early investigation stages. May, I echoed. Not will. He didn't soften the truth. This is a messy case involving family, corporate fraud, and interstate financial activity. You're a central witness whether you want to be or not. My chest tightened. He sensed the shift and added, But you are not the villain in this story, Avery. You're the person doing the right thing. Doing the right thing. It sounded noble in theory. In practice, it felt like pulling a pin from a grenade. I want to protect my family, I whispered. I don't want them destroyed because of this. Greer nodded. Then the first step is to get in front of the investigation instead of behind it. He printed several forms and slid them toward me. We'll file your statement confidentially. I'll be your counsel during the inquiry. And starting today, you will not contact Crestwell, Hartwell, or anyone connected to their leadership. I nodded. And Avery, he said firmly. You will not confront Elias alone, no matter what. My pulse jumped. I wasn't planning to. He arched a brow. I looked away. Not anymore. He let out a controlled sigh. I'll contact the federal office this afternoon. Expect a call for preliminary verification. Be calm, be honest, and stick to the facts. You've done the right thing coming here. When the meeting ended, I felt both grounded and unmoored, like someone had given me a blueprint for a building I wasn't sure I was ready to construct. Still, I walked out with purpose in my step. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was survival, for my family, and maybe for me too. Outside, the wind stung my face. I wrapped my scarf tighter and headed to my car. As I climbed in, my phone rang. It was Rachel. You won't believe what just happened, she said without greeting. My stomach dropped. What now? Compliance sent an alert to our whole department this morning. There's been a formal request to preserve all internal documents related to Crestwell Capital. Cold sweat prickled down my back. Already? It gets worse, she said. Your name was flagged for unusual activity. They're reviewing your credentials. And there it was, the first official ripple of the storm. Rachel, I said slowly, I met with an attorney this morning. Good, she breathed. You're going to need one. A wave of fear washed over me, but I kept my voice calm. Thank you for warning me. Just be careful, she said. This is bigger than all of us. We hung up, and I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the panic. The walls were closing in faster than I expected, but panic wouldn't help. Action would. I started the engine and headed toward Coldridge. The highway stretched out clean and white, the sky an endless gray dome. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as I replayed everything Rachel had said. If corporate compliance was already moving, then federal investigators were likely doing the same. And if they approached Crestwell before I did, I needed to prepare my parents. I needed to ensure that neither Dad nor Sienna accidentally incriminated themselves. When I turned onto the long road leading into Coldridge, the town appeared quiet. Too quiet. I parked in front of my parents' house again, stepping into the cold air with a sense of urgency. Before I could knock, the door opened. Dad stood there, face pale, jaw tight. We need to talk, he said. I stepped inside and immediately saw why his expression had changed. The living room coffee table was covered in papers, contracts, bank notices, handwritten notes. Mom sat stiffly on the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sienna stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself as if bracing against a cold that wasn't physical. Dad picked up a document and handed it to me. This came in the mail this morning. I scanned it quickly. An official notice requesting documentation for several transactions tied to Langford Development. A preliminary inquiry. Nothing accusatory, yet. But it was the kind of document that preceded something larger, something formal. "They're looking," I whispered. Dad nodded grimly. "And they'll find we signed off on contracts we didn't understand." Mom's voice trembled. "We were trying to fix things. We thought we were doing the right thing." Sienna's eyes were red. "Avery, I didn't know it was fraud. I swear." I set the papers down and faced them. "It doesn't matter what you knew. What matters now is what you do next." Dad swallowed hard. "We'll cooperate." "You have to," I said, "and you need to stop trusting anything Elias ever told you." At the mention of his name, Mom flinched. Sienna looked away. Dad sat beside her and rubbed his temples. "I've called the board. We're freezing operations until further notice." That hit me harder than I expected. Langford Development had been in our family for decades. Seeing Dad say the words aloud felt like watching the foundation crack under his feet. "I met with an attorney this morning," I said gently. "He's filing a protected statement for me, and he's going to help us navigate what comes next." Dad nodded slowly. "Good," Mom whispered. Is it going to get worse?" I didn't lie. "Before it gets better? Yes." Silence settled over the room. Then Dad said something that made the breath catch in my throat. "Thank you, Avery, for not walking away." Mom looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. Sienna walked over and slipped her hand into mine, squeezing once. I wanted to collapse from the weight of it all, but there was no time. "We need to gather everything," I said. "Every contract, every email, every message. The investigators will want it." Dad nodded and stood. "Then let's start." We spent the next 2 hours sorting through documents, old contracts, new ones, notices from Crestwell, email printouts, handwritten memos. The more we found, the more the picture clarified. Elias hadn't just manipulated them. He had used them as shields, as human camouflage for his operation, and he'd positioned them perfectly to take the fall when the walls finally closed in. When we reached a stack of documents tied to Hartwell, Mom froze. "I remember this," she whispered. "He asked me to sign something when your father wasn't home. He said it was a formality." Dad's fists clenched. "And you didn't tell me?" "He said it was confidential," she said softly. "He said he didn't want to worry you." He looked away, pain creasing his forehead. I touched Mom's hand. "It's not your fault. He knew what he was doing." Mom looked like she might break, but she didn't. She squared her shoulders instead. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Not long," I said. After hours of sorting, the dining table was covered with documents. Sienna finally sank onto the couch, exhausted. Dad placed his hands on the back of a chair, leaning into it. "What now?" "Now," I said, "we wait for the investigators to call." Sienna's voice cracked. "I want this to be done." I sat beside her. "It will be, eventually, but we have to walk through it." "Together?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, together." The wind rattled the window, snow drifting softly outside like a reminder that the world kept moving whether we were ready or not. As I stood to leave, Dad followed me to the door. He paused, then said quietly, "I'm proud of you." The words caught me off guard. I didn't cry, but I felt something inside me loosen, just slightly. When I stepped into the cold, I knew the storm had only begun. But for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. Snow drifted in thin spirals across the road as I drove back to Denver, the sky sinking into a steel-gray dusk. The day had stretched longer than it should have. Meetings, warnings, evidence piling higher than my nerves could handle. But I felt strangely steadier than I had in days. Every step forward was a step out of the dark, even if the path was jagged. And yet, as the city skyline came into view, a tightness returned to my chest. I knew what waited for me at home. I knew the investigation would escalate. I knew the storm was gathering speed. Still, I hadn't expected the message waiting on my phone when I walked into my apartment. It was from an unknown number. "We see you. Stop this now." The words were blunt, cold, and confident in a way that turned my stomach. Not threatening, promising. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, resisting the urge to throw it. For a few long seconds, I just stood there, breathing, counting the beats in my chest until the sharp edge of fear dulled again. This wasn't new. Whoever was behind Crestwell had already sent warnings. But now that legal bodies were involved, whoever sent this was getting desperate. Good, I thought bitterly. Desperation meant cracks. I plugged in my laptop and logged back into our internal portal, searching for any sign that my credentials had been used again. There were no new flags, no suspicious logins, nothing to suggest someone had breached my account a second time. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but alert. I had to walk carefully. One wrong move and this entire case could flip on me. One wrong assumption, and I'd be labeled a participant instead of a witness. The thought alone made my pulse quicken. A knock at the door jolted me upright. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft taps. But at this hour, it felt like a gunshot. I approached the door quietly and looked through the peephole. Relief washed through me when I saw Rachel standing there, bundled in her coat, her breath fogging in the hallway. I opened the door immediately. "Rach, what are you doing here?" She stepped inside quickly, glancing down the hallway before the door closed behind her. I didn't want to say this over the phone. My stomach tightened. What happened? She slipped off her gloves, avoiding my eyes. "There was a meeting this afternoon. Upper compliance. Legal was there. They didn't name you directly, but..." Her voice dropped. "Your manager pulled your access temporarily." I felt my body go still. "They suspended me?" "No," she said quickly. "Not formally, but they flagged your credentials and locked your login. They want to review activity." Which was corporate language for, "We don't trust you right now." "How many people know?" I asked. "Only a few," she said. "But rumors travel fast." My legs felt weak. I sank onto the edge of the couch. "They think I'm involved." "They're being cautious," Rachel said gently. "But yes, they're preparing for the worst-case scenario." Of course they were, and if I hadn't acted early, if I hadn't spoken to Greer or collected evidence, this could have spiraled into career-ending damage before I even knew the scope. Rachel sat beside me. "Tell me you talked to someone, a lawyer, you filed something. You didn't try to handle this alone." I nodded slowly. "I met with an attorney. He's filing a protected statement." "Good," she whispered. "You did the right thing." But my mind was already shifting. If corporate compliance was locking down systems, then federal investigators were moving too. And Elias, he wouldn't sit quietly. Not a man like him. Not when the walls were closing in. "What about Crestwell?" I asked. "Have they responded to the inquiry?" Rachel shook her head. "Not publicly, but they're pretending nothing is wrong. And their CEO?" She hesitated. "What about him?" "He's been unreachable since this morning." A chill slid through me. Unreachable how? No calls, no emails, no statements, nothing. He disappeared. I thought of Elias, the way he'd eased into our family, the way he'd smiled across my parents' dinner table, the way he'd encouraged them to trust him. And now Crestwell's leadership was going dark. I stood abruptly. "We need to find him." "No," Rachel said immediately. "Avery, let investigators do that." "He's the key," I said. "He's the one who looped my family in. He's the reason compliance is targeting me. And he's the one who can bury us all if he isn't stopped." Rachel grabbed my arm, her grip firm. "You are not confronting him. I'm serious." I pulled free gently. "I'll be careful." That's what people say right before they disappear. I forced a small breath. "I won't disappear." She shook her head again, fear creeping into her eyes. "Let the process work, Avery. Let legal handle him." But legal didn't know my family. Legal didn't know the ways Elias moved, the way he chose his targets. Legal didn't know the kind of man he was beneath all the charm. I did. When Rachel finally left, I locked the door behind her and leaned against it, eyes closed. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. My thoughts hummed loudly in the silence. I turned toward my laptop again, this time opening the secure drive where I'd saved the USB contents. There had to be something there, something that could tell me where Elias went, or what Crestwell was planning. I clicked into the Hartwell folder again. One file stood out, Hartwell vendor, timestamp log.pdf. I hadn't looked at it earlier. It was a long list of document submissions tied to the shell company. I scrolled. Most entries were from Crestwell employees, but one series of timestamps was different, clumped together around a single week 2 months ago. Entries full of errors and corrections. Entries with signatures that didn't match. Entries that had been forced into the system using override codes only a senior executive could access. Override codes. I froze. There was a name connected to the override request. Not Elias, another executive, someone higher, someone I didn't recognize immediately. I opened a second tab and looked him up. My blood ran cold. He was Crestwell's CFO, and he had resigned suddenly 3 weeks ago, citing health reasons. But the news articles now called it mysterious circumstances. A chill crept up my spine. Elias wasn't working alone. There was someone above him, someone running the financial architecture of the fraud. I closed the laptop slowly. This wasn't just a family scandal. It wasn't just my sister's fiancé being shady. This was organized, coordinated, a professional laundering pipeline. And for reasons I didn't yet understand, they had pulled Langford Development into it. My phone buzzed again. Another message. New number this time. You're making noise. That's dangerous. I stared at the words, my breath shallow. This wasn't the same tone as before. This was restrained, cold, strategic. Someone was monitoring my moves in real time. I blocked the number, took a screenshot for evidence, and shut off my phone completely. I needed to move, change environments, think clearly. So I grabbed my coat, my laptop, and the folder of printed documents I had collected from my parents' house. I headed downstairs to the car, scanning the garage instinctively. A black SUV was parked 2 spaces away. I knew it didn't belong to anyone in my building, and the engine was running. My pulse spiked. I walked calmly to my car, turned on the engine, drove out. I didn't look back until I was at the exit ramp. The SUV followed for 2 seconds, then turned the opposite direction. I didn't know if it meant anything. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. I drove to a nearby coffee shop, one open late, one with cameras and crowds and noise. Safety in numbers. I ordered tea I didn't want and sat in the back where I could see the entrance. I opened my laptop again. I needed a plan, not reaction, strategy. I pulled up everything, the altered contracts, the offshore routing numbers, the fake vendors, the resigning CFO, the forged signatures, the text threats, the inquiry letters, the timeline of every suspicious transaction. All of it formed a pattern. But the center of the pattern was clearer than anything else. Elias. He wasn't the mastermind, but he was the bridge, the connection, the one who had pulled a vulnerable family into a fraud they didn't understand. My family. And if I didn't act fast, investigators would reach them first, and they would be unprotected. I dialed Mom from a secure call app. She answered immediately, voice trembling. "Avery, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said softly. "But listen closely. Do not answer calls from unknown numbers. If anyone asks for documents, you send them only to me or the attorney. Do not talk to Crestwell. Do not talk to Elias." Mom breathed shakily. "Is it getting worse?" "It's getting real," I said, "and that means we need to be smarter." "Your father hasn't slept," she whispered. "He keeps pacing. He's scared." "I know," I said gently. "Tell him I'm working on it." Before she could respond, I saw someone enter the coffee shop, head down, scarf pulled high over his jaw. My breath stopped. Elias. He scanned the room slowly, looking for someone. My chest tightened so violently I almost stood too quickly. He didn't see me. Not yet. But he was here, too close, too deliberate. Mom's voice echoed faintly through the phone. Avery? Avery, what's wrong? I lowered my voice. Mom, lock the doors. I'll call you back. I ended the call. Elias took another step inside, shaking snow from his coat. His eyes lifted and landed on me. He froze when his gaze locked onto mine, his posture tightening in a way that told me he hadn't come here by accident. He didn't look surprised. He looked expectant, like he'd planned for this, like he'd been tracking me. I slid my laptop closed slowly, keeping my movements controlled, calm, deliberate. The hum of the coffee shop felt suddenly distant, muffled under the roar of blood in my ears. Conversations faded. Cups clinked somewhere near the counter. A barista laughed, but all of it blurred behind the sight of Elias crossing the room toward me, each step precise, quiet, measured. I didn't panic. Panic was loud. Panic was noticeable. What I needed was steady. And so I straightened in my seat, my pulse thudding in my throat, and met his approach with the same practiced calm I used in conference rooms with corporate executives who lied for a living. He reached my table and paused. Avery, he said smoothly, voice dipped in warmth he didn't mean. I wondered when we'd run into each other. I rested my hands on the table, fingers loose. You tracked my phone. His smile didn't shift, but something icy flickered behind his eyes. Why would I do that? You tell me, I said evenly. He glanced around, watching the cafe with an air of casual confidence before slipping into the chair across from me. He leaned back, crossing one ankle over his knee like he was settling in for a pleasant catch-up. You're a hard person to reach these days, he said lightly. Your sister's worried. My sister, I echoed, keeping my tone flat, is afraid of you. His smile sharpened. She's emotional. You know how she gets. I studied him closely. The man had always been polished, pressed shirts, clean lines, perfect hair, but today there was something frayed around the edges, a flicker in the eye, a tightness around the mouth, something unraveling. You didn't come here for coffee, I said. No, he agreed quietly. I came to talk. That's what the anonymous messages were for? His jaw ticked. Barely, but it ticked. Sometimes, he said softly, people need reminders to keep their noses out of places they don't belong. You mean my family's business? I asked. Or Crestwell's offshore laundry service? He didn't flinch. That was the part that chilled me. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Avery, you're making a mistake. I laughed under my breath. You've told that lie to everyone in my family already. Try something new. He didn't appreciate that. His hand tightened around the armrest, knuckles whitening just slightly. You think you understand what's happening, he murmured. But you don't. This is bigger than your father's company, bigger than your sister, bigger than some petty disagreement between us. Then enlighten me, I said, folding my arms. He glanced toward the door, toward the windows, then back at me with a subtle shift, like a man who wanted to talk but shouldn't. Leave it alone, he said, voice low, almost pleading. Walk away, let this play out. Trust me when I tell you that interfering will not end well for you. For me? I repeated. Or for you? He exhaled through his nose, controlled but fraying. You're smart, Avery. Smarter than most people in your office. Smarter than your father. Smarter than your sister. I get why you're curious. But curiosity in the wrong direction. His eyes darkened. Has consequences. I held his gaze without blinking. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. His words hung in the air, heavy and quiet and without theatrics. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. A man telling me exactly how the world worked in the circles he moved in. I inhaled, steadying myself. "You used my family," I said softly. "You made them sign fraudulent contracts. You dragged them into your mess." "They needed help," he countered, shrugging lightly. "They were desperate. I offered a solution. If your father had managed his company better, none of this would have been necessary." "And forging signatures?" I asked. "Changing dates? Creating shell vendors? Was that necessary too?" His eyes flickered once, only once. "People make mistakes," he said. "And some people commit crimes," I replied. The corner of his mouth twitched. "You think you've found something big. You think you've connected dots no one else has connected." He leaned in, lowering his voice further. "But you don't have the full picture. And if you keep pushing, you're going to expose things that can't be buried again." "And that scares you," I said quietly. His smile faded. "What scares me is that I can't protect Sienna if you drag her into this." My chest tightened. "You never protected her." He leaned back again. "She signed documents. Her name is on approvals. You think investigators will care that she didn't understand how the financial system works? Ignorance doesn't absolve liability." My pulse spiked. He saw it, and he smiled. "That's what I thought," he murmured. For a moment, anger flared so sharp it nearly choked me. But anger wasn't useful here, so I swallowed it and asked the only question that mattered. "Where's Crestwell's CFO?" His face stilled. "You know," I continued, "the one who resigned suddenly. The one who executed override codes on your fake vendor invoices." He didn't blink, didn't look away. But something deep in him recoiled, just for a second. "You're in deeper than I thought," he said quietly. Then, almost as if remembering where he was, he stood. Calmly, smoothly, like nothing had happened. "I'll give you one more chance," he said. "Stop now." "And if I don't?" I asked. He slipped his coat back on, adjusting the collar with slow precision. "Then whatever happens next is on you." He moved toward the door. I stayed seated, watching him walk into the swirling snow. The wind whipped around him, lifting the edges of his coat. He didn't look back. I didn't breathe until he was gone. The barista called out another order. Someone laughed in the corner. Life resumed around me slowly, as if nothing remarkable had happened. But everything had changed. I reopened my laptop. My hands shook. Not with fear, with adrenaline. He was slipping. He was scared. I left the cafe 10 minutes later, scanning the street. No SUV, no shadows, just swirling snow and fading daylight. Back in my car, I dialed Greer using the secure line he'd given me. He answered immediately. "Yes?" "He found me," I said. Silence filled the line. "Where?" he asked. "A coffee shop on 14th. He wanted to warn me off." Greer's voice hardened. "Avery, you need to stay somewhere safe tonight. And you need to document every detail of that interaction." "I will," I said. "But there's more." I explained the CFO connection, the override codes, the missing executive, the pattern forming in the documents. He exhaled sharply. "This goes far beyond a simple fraud scheme. You've stepped into a corporate conspiracy." "I know," I said softly. "You need to meet with the federal agents sooner than planned," he told me. "I'll push to expedite it." We hung up. My heart wouldn't slow. I started the engine and headed back toward Coldridge. I didn't know why I drove there instinctively. Maybe because I needed to see my family. Maybe because I needed them to be safe. Maybe because distance made everything feel more fragile. When I reached my parents' street, I slowed. Their lights were on, and another car sat in the driveway. Not mine, not Dad's, not Sienna's. My breath caught in my throat. I parked across the street and stepped out quietly. The snow crunched beneath my boots. My breath fogged in the icy air. I scanned the house carefully. Through the front window, I saw my father pacing, my mother gripping a phone, Sienna sitting on the stairs, knees pulled to her chest, and standing in the doorway, a man in a dark coat. Not Elias. Someone older. Sterner. Someone who looked like he belonged in a boardroom rather than a family home. He turned slightly. I recognized him from Crestwell's website instantly. Crestwell's CFO. The missing one. The sick one. The man who had vanished. My blood froze. He wasn't sick. He wasn't missing. He was standing in my parents' house, and he was talking to them. The man in the doorway had the composed stillness of someone used to negotiating in silence, not chaos. He stood with his back half-turned to the window, hands tucked into the pockets of a dark overcoat, his posture straight, deliberate, unreadable. My parents hovered nearby, tense as glass, and Sienna sat frozen on the stairs, knees against her chest, watching him like he was a storm that had blown through the front door. I stayed hidden in the shadows of the driveway, watching through the narrow slit between the curtains. His face came into clearer view when he shifted slightly, sharp jaw, silvering hair, an expression that was neither apologetic nor aggressive, simply calculating. Cold, detached, the kind of man who signed off on bad deals and never flinched when they ruined people. Crestwell's missing CFO. He wasn't missing. He was standing in my parents' living room like he had every right to be there. I moved swiftly back to my car and dialed Greer with trembling fingers. He answered on the second ring. "He's here," I whispered. "Who?" "The CFO," I said, voice barely audible. "At my parents' house." Greer cursed under his breath. "Avery, listen carefully. Do not go inside. Do not engage. Call your parents out, calmly. Get them outside if you can. If you can't, you stay put." "I can't just leave them in there with him." "Avery," he said with sharp urgency, "you're the only person who knows what he is. Your parents don't understand how dangerous he can be. You do. Act accordingly." I forced myself to breathe evenly. "I'll call you back." I hung up and began typing a quick message to my mother. "Where is Dad? Are you safe? Answer yes or no." I watched through the window as Mom subtly checked her phone. Her hands trembled as she typed back, "No." A cold wave rushed through me. Then, "He says he needs documents Dad signed. Says it's just a misunderstanding. Should we cooperate? Absolutely not." I typed fast. "Do not sign anything. Do not hand over anything. Say you need fresh air. Step outside. I will be waiting." She read the message and hesitated. The CFO's gaze landed on her sharp as a blade. My mother's throat bobbed as she swallowed. She stood slowly. I need a moment," she said. "Some air." Her voice wavered but held. The CFO didn't move, didn't question it. My father shot her a confused glance but didn't speak. She slipped out the front door. I stepped out of the car immediately and hurried across the yard. She gasped when she saw me. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, clutching my arms. "Is he dangerous?" "He's not here to help," I said. "Where's Dad? Where's Sienna?" "Inside," she said shakily. "He said he wanted to clarify some numbers from their partnership. Avery, the way he talked, so calm, so confident. I thought maybe we'd misunderstood." "You didn't misunderstand anything," I said. "He's here to protect himself, not you." She shivered violently, even though the cold wasn't that bitter. "I should get your father." "No," I said quickly. "You stay here. I'll get them." "No," Mom whispered fiercely, gripping my sleeve. "Avery, you can't go in alone." But I already had my hand on the doorknob. Inside, the air felt heavier, denser, like the whole house was holding its breath. Dad stood stiffly near the armchair, jaw working, fists clenched at his sides. Sienna was still sitting on the stairs, pale and staring. The CFO turned as soon as I entered. "Avery," he said with the kind of smooth authority people spend years perfecting. "I've been wanting to speak with you." I closed the door behind me without looking away from him. "Funny, you vanished." "Health leave," he replied with a ghost of a smile. "Stress-related." I stepped forward. "So when did stress start looking like offshore transfers and override codes?" His smile didn't falter, but something in his eyes cooled. He tilted his head slightly, studying me the way a surgeon might study an incision site. "You're a clever woman," he said, "which is why I hoped we could speak privately. before this becomes more complicated than it needs to be. Where's Elias? I asked. A small pause. Working through a few logistical issues. A convenient term for fleeing. He didn't blink. He's safe. Safe, meaning protected, meaning hidden, meaning they were already preparing a defense. You shouldn't be here, Dad snapped, stepping between us in a sudden burst of protectiveness I hadn't seen in years. My daughter doesn't have to explain anything to you. The CFO's eyes flicked toward him, respectfully, almost politely, but with the subtle edge of someone who had already mapped out the man's weaknesses. Mr. Langford, he said calmly, I only need one thing, the original partnership contracts. Once I retrieve them, you'll be left out of the inquiry. I'll make sure of it. Dad stiffened. Why? The CFO offered a mild shrug. Because the narrative is changing, and if I have control of those documents, I can shape how this looks, for everyone involved. He was asking for access to evidence, so he could bury it, or rewrite it. Sienna's breath hitched. Dad, don't give him anything. Dad looked uncertain for the first time. But if it helps... It won't, I said sharply. He's not here to help you, Dad. He's here because the investigation is closing in. The CFO clasped his hands behind his back. Federal investigators move slowly, Avery, and they haven't contacted me. Because they can't find you, I snapped. He gave a small, amused smile. Perhaps. Dad stared between us, stunned. Why would they be looking for you? The CFO looked directly at him then, face smooth as stone. Because some individuals within Crestwell made choices that could reflect poorly on the board. My priority is ensuring none of those choices lead back to you. You mean you're covering your tracks, I said. Sienna whispered, Dad, he's lying. The CFO turned to her slowly. You signed documents connecting you to Hartwell Consulting. If I go down, do you know what will happen to every signatory tied to those contracts? She flinched as if struck. I stepped forward, fury flooding my limbs. That's enough. He raised a hand. I'm stating facts, nothing more. No, I said, voice low, steady, shaking with fury I'd held for days. You're threatening my family. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply said, This is a business conversation. Not a personal one. Dad's voice cracked. My daughter is not collateral in your business. The CFO paused, then spoke softly, reasonably. Then give me the contracts. Dad hesitated. And I saw it. The moment fear outweighed judgment in his eyes. That terrified me more than anything else. I moved fast. No, I said sharply. Dad, don't. If you give him those documents, you destroy any chance of protecting yourself, and Sienna, and Mom. Dad swallowed hard. The CFO clasped his hands, expression serene. Mr. Langford, be reasonable. You are in over your head. Your daughter can't save you. She lacks the institutional leverage. Let me fix this before it implicates you? I asked. His eyes flicked to me again, irritation finally breaking through his calm facade. You don't understand the scope of what you've inserted yourself into. I understand enough, I said. Enough to know you're afraid. A thin crack appeared in his expression, almost invisible but real. Then he sighed as if disappointed in a stubborn child. If you won't cooperate voluntarily... He stepped toward my father. Instinct surged through me. I moved in front of Dad before he could. You lay one hand on him, I said, voice low, and I'll walk into the federal office tonight with everything. The room stilled. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hiss of the heater. He leaned in just enough for only me to hear. If you hand those documents over, he murmured, you won't ruin me. You'll ruin your entire family, and you'll never wash that blood off. A chill sliced down my spine. He straightened, smoothed his coat, turned toward the door. We're not done, he said. I stepped forward. Yes, we are. He opened the door. Mom gasped from outside. The CFO paused on the porch and looked back at me. "You think you're doing the right thing," he said softly, "but you have no idea what you're stepping into." Then he walked into the snow. I didn't move until the taillights of his car disappeared down the road. Dad sank into the nearest chair, face pale. Mom slipped inside, shaking. Sienna collapsed against the banister, sobbing quietly. None of us spoke. The quiet stretched until Dad finally whispered, "Avery, what now?" I knelt beside him, placing a hand over his. "We prepare," I said, "and tomorrow we tell everything to the federal agents. Every word, every document, every threat." Mom wiped her eyes. "Will that be enough?" I looked toward the dark window where the CFO had disappeared. "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's the only way we survive this." The house was silent again. But the storm brewing outside wasn't weather. It was the truth. And we were finally walking into it. The federal building loomed gray and imposing against the winter sky when I pulled into the visitor lot the next morning. I sat in my car for a few long breaths, gathering myself, feeling the weight of what the next few hours would demand. Inside my coat pocket were 3 things: the USB drive, the printed documents from my parents' house, and the written timeline I'd stayed up half the night creating. My hands shook only slightly when I finally opened the door. A blast of cold air hit me as I crossed the lot, the wind slicing through the seams of my coat. Denver in winter always felt sharp, but today the cold carried something else. Finality, consequence, the kind of chill that settled in the chest, not just the skin. I paused outside the revolving doors, exhaled once, then stepped inside. A woman at the security desk gave me a sympathetic smile as she scanned my ID. "Second floor," she said. "Conference room 2B. They're expecting you." The elevator ride felt too short and too long all at once. When the doors slid open, a man in a gray suit with a badge clipped to his belt greeted me. "Avery Langford?" "Yes," I said. "I'm Special Agent Callahan." He gestured down the hallway. "Come with me." His tone was professional, even kind in its own way, but it carried an edge, something sharpened by years of interrogations, of sorting truth from carefully crafted lies. I followed him into a room with a long table and a large digital recorder already set out. Another agent sat waiting, a woman with dark hair pulled tightly back, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Langford," she said, extending a hand. "Agent Ruiz, please have a seat." I sat. Agent Callahan clicked on the recorder, then nodded toward me. "We're going to begin with a formal statement. This isn't an interrogation. You're not under suspicion, but you are a primary witness." I nodded, feeling my heartbeat thudding hard in my throat. Agent Ruiz folded her hands on the table. "Start from the beginning. Tell us how you became aware of Crestwell Capital's financial irregularities and how your family became involved." I took a breath, steady and deep. "It started on Christmas Eve," I said, "when I was uninvited to my family's dinner." Their pens paused, both of them glancing up with subtle confusion, until I continued, laying out the events one by one, carefully, accurately. I described the glowing windows, the empty seat replaced by Elias, the timing of the text that kept me away from the house. I told them about the message from Rachel, the USB drive, the contracts, the false vendors. I explained the forged initials, the override codes, the CFO's disappearance, his sudden reappearance in my parents' doorway. The words poured out of me in a mixture of precision and memory, clear but edged with emotion I could no longer separate from the facts. At times my voice wavered, but I never lost the thread. When I finished, Agent Ruiz leaned back slowly, processing. "You said the CFO visited your parents' house last night," she added. "Can you describe his demeanor?" "Calm," I said. "Controlled. Threatening, but quietly so. He asked for original contracts. He implied that if my family didn't hand them over, we'd be implicated alongside him." Callahan exchanged a look with Ruiz. "That tracks," he murmured. "With what?" I asked. Ruiz hesitated only a second. "We've been trying to locate him for a week. Officially, he's been unreachable, off the grid, but that's not uncommon when someone's preparing to negotiate a plea deal, or flee. A chill moved through me. He's dangerous. They didn't deny it. Ms. Langford, Ruiz said gently, we appreciate what you've brought us. But I need to be clear about something. I forced myself to hold her gaze. Okay. You're not just a witness. You are a whistleblower, and Crestwell won't let that go lightly. My pulse jumped. I don't want protection. I want action. And you'll have it, Callahan said, but we need to move methodically. Cases like this, money laundering, shell vendors, fraud, they unravel quickly, but they also explode if we're not careful. He nodded toward the USB. May we access the drive? Yes. I slid it toward them. Ruiz inserted it into her laptop, her eyes darting as she scanned the folder structure. You have a good eye, she said. These files, they're exactly what we needed. Callahan pushed a notepad toward me. One more thing, we're issuing immediate subpoenas for Crestwell's executive communications, and that will send shockwaves through the board. When that happens, you need to stay alert. We'll put surveillance on your parents' home if you request it. That's not necessary, I said automatically. Ruiz looked at me sharply. It is. My throat tightened. Callahan added, you and your family are in the blast radius of a crime we've been tracking for months. Let us protect you. I nodded, swallowing hard. Okay. The meeting stretched nearly 2 hours. Every detail mattered. Every inconsistency they flagged, I filled in with something my parents had told me, something Sienna had admitted between tears, something Elias had implied with a smile that had never quite reached his eyes. When the recording stopped and Callahan escorted me to the elevator, he said quietly, This won't be easy, Ms. Langford, but your statement may have just broken open a case that's been stalled. Something flickered in me, pride, maybe, or relief, but it was short-lived, because when I walked back into the parking garage, I saw the black SUV, 2 spaces from my car, engine running, windows tinted so dark they reflected only the concrete pillars around it. The same SUV I'd seen before. My breath caught. I scanned the rows, heart racing. A man stepped out from behind a pillar, too quickly. For a second I froze, but then I recognized him. Dad? I exhaled shakily. He hurried toward me. Avery, God, you're all right. He gripped my shoulders, eyes frantic. Your mother called. She said you were meeting with federal agents. I couldn't just sit at home. My knees nearly buckled with relief. What are you doing here? He shook his head. I need to be part of this. I need to understand what happens next. I glanced at the SUV. Is that... No, he said. It was here when I arrived. We both turned toward it, tension creeping across both our spines. The engine revved once. Then, slowly, deliberately, the SUV pulled out of the spot. It rolled past us, the windows still too dark to see inside. But as it neared the exit, the driver lowered the passenger side window just an inch, a hint of a silhouette, a hint of a chin, a hint of someone watching. Then the window went up again, and the SUV disappeared into daylight. Dad exhaled shakily. Do you think... I don't know, I said. But we're being watched. He ran a hand through his hair. This is bigger than I ever imagined. I know. And I'm scared, he admitted softly. Not of prison. Not of losing the company. His voice cracked. I'm scared of losing you. Something inside me broke open. Dad. He pulled me into a tight embrace, the kind he hadn't given me since I was a child. I'm proud of you, he whispered, for standing up when I didn't, for seeing what I refused to. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. We're going to get through this. He nodded gratefully, stepping back. What now? I exhaled slowly. We wait for the agents to act. And we stay alert, especially for Elias. Dad's jaw tightened. If he comes near this family again, I placed a hand on his arm. Let the law handle him. Fine, he muttered. But if he hurts Sienna, he won't, I said quietly. But the truth was, I wasn't sure. Elias had looked fragile in the coffee shop, fraying. A cornered man with too much to lose was unpredictable, dangerous. And guilt didn't motivate him. Self-preservation did. "Let's go home," Dad said. We drove separately, but I stayed close behind him the entire way, my eyes shifting constantly between the road and the rearview mirror. Halfway to Coldridge, my phone buzzed. A new number, a single message. "You're running out of time." A tremor ran through me. Dad must have seen my car swerve slightly because he slowed, checking on me through his mirror. I steadied the wheel. No, I wasn't running out of time. They were, and the truth was closing in fast. Dad and I pulled into the driveway of the Langford house just past noon, the clouds thick and heavy above us like a sky waiting to break. The air smelled like snow even though none was falling yet, sharp, metallic, expectant. I watched Dad climb out of his car, slower than usual, as if everything that happened in the last 24 hours had settled into his bones. He gave me a small, steady nod before we walked toward the front door together. Inside, the house was too quiet. Mom sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea untouched in front of her, staring at the steam as if it held answers. Sienna was pacing, her arms wrapped tightly around her chest, her movements restless and frantic. When she saw us, she stopped abruptly. "Did you talk to them?" she asked. "The agents?" "Yes," I said. "They have everything now." Her face went pale. "What does that mean? Are they coming here? Are we suspects?" "No," I said softly. "We're witnesses. But the people Crestwell is really looking at won't go down quietly." Sienna closed her eyes and sank onto the sofa. "I can't believe I let him manipulate me like that." "You weren't the only one," Dad said grimly. "He fooled me too." Mom set her cup down with a trembling hand. "What did the agents say?" "They're issuing subpoenas today," I said. "Crestwell's board will be notified within hours. The CFO won't be able to hide much longer." A flicker of fear crossed Mom's face. "And Elias?" I hesitated. "He's next." The house seemed to exhale at that, like every wall had been waiting for the truth. Dad stepped closer. "What should we do?" "For now," I said, "we stay home. The agents might call. They might need clarification. And you two shouldn't be anywhere people can corner you." Mom nodded quickly. Sienna curled her knees up to her chest. Dad sank into the armchair like a man who finally accepted he could stop running. But peace lasted less than 5 minutes. A hard rap on the door snapped everyone to attention. 3 knocks, firm, controlled, not frantic, not desperate, confident. My stomach dropped. Sienna whispered, "Is that—" "Stay here," I said. I moved toward the door, forcing my breath to stay even. I looked through the peephole, and ice crawled up my spine. Elias. He stood on the porch, coat dusted with snow, expression composed in a way that didn't match the panic he should have been feeling. His eyes were cold, focused, steady. Controlled in a way I hadn't seen before. "Avery, don't," Mom whispered behind me. "Don't open it." But I wasn't about to let him knock again and draw attention from the neighbors, or let him think he held any power here. I unlocked the door. Elias lifted his chin slightly. "We need to talk." "No," I said. "We don't." His gaze flicked past me. "Is your father home?" Dad stood behind me before I could stop him. "I am." Elias smiled faintly. "Then yes, we do need to talk." Dad stepped forward, but I blocked him with my arm. "You don't talk alone," I said. "If anything gets said, it gets said in front of everyone." Elias's smile didn't fade. "Fine." I stepped aside, not to welcome him, but to prevent him from forcing his way in. He walked inside slowly, as if scanning the living room for weaknesses, measuring our reactions, cataloging who was afraid and who wasn't. Mom hovered near the kitchen. Sienna remained frozen on the sofa. Dad stood tall but unsteady. Elias removed his gloves and placed them neatly in his coat pocket. "I'm sure you've all had a stressful few days." That's one way to put it, I said flatly. He tilted his head. I came to clarify a few things before rumors spiral out of control. Rumors like federal subpoenas? I asked. His jaw tightened for half a second. I heard about that. I'm sure you did, I said. He took a breath and turned toward my father. Marcus, you and I both know this situation has been blown out of proportion. Crestwell's restructuring was complex. I did everything I could to shield your company from the fallout. That hasn't changed. Dad stared at him coldly. You lied to me. You lied to my daughter. You used us. Elias's voice softened. I guided you through difficult choices. I helped you keep Langford Development afloat. You forged my name, Dad snapped. Elias didn't flinch. To protect you, to keep things moving. You panicked about the deadlines? I didn't sign anything with that offshore entity, Dad said. That's exactly why I did, Elias replied smoothly. To give you plausible deniability if anyone looked too closely. Every muscle in my body tightened. He wasn't denying the fraud. He wasn't even pretending innocence. He was reframing his crimes as favors. I stepped forward. You used our family. You used Sienna. He turned to her slowly. Sienna knew what she was signing. She shrank back. I didn't. He told me. He said. He cut her off. You're an adult. You signed your name. You benefited from what I built. Sienna's breath hitched. I moved closer, standing between them. Don't talk to her, I said. He lifted one brow. You're not in charge here, Avery. I am today. Something flickered in his expression. Annoyance, maybe even panic, but it was gone too fast to analyze. Then he spoke the words that made my blood freeze. If Langford Development goes down, you all go down with it. Not just your father, not just Sienna, you too. Mom gasped. Dad took a step forward like he might hit him. Sienna began shaking. I forced my voice to stay steady. What are you implying? Elias shrugged lightly. Your digital signature is on one of the Hartwell approvals. Dad turned to me sharply. What? My stomach twisted. It's forged. He knows that. Elias smiled. Can you prove that? Can the investigators, when everything is buried under a mountain of frantic cover-ups? Dad's face hardened. Get out of my house. But Elias wasn't done. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think the CFO is your enemy? He murmured. You think Crestwell is scared of your little statement? They aren't. They're gathering their own narrative right now, and when they tell investigators who was involved... His eyes slid to me. I promise your name will come up first. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dad's voice broke into a shout. I said get out! Elias didn't move. You're making a mistake, Marcus, a very big one. I'm correcting a mistake, Dad snapped. You. For the first time, Elias's calm facade cracked. His jaw clenched, and his hands tightened at his sides. He turned toward the door, coat swaying behind him, and paused only once, right beside me. You can't save them, Avery, he whispered. Not from this, not from Crestwell, not from themselves. I didn't step back. Watch me. His eyes glinted with something sharp, anger, maybe fear, and then he left, pulling the door closed behind him. Silence filled the house. No one moved. No one breathed. Finally, Mom collapsed into a chair, hands shaking. That man is evil, she whispered. Sienna wiped tears from her face. He's going to ruin us. Oh God, Avery, he's going to ruin us. Dad paced, fists clenched, muttering curses under his breath. I stood by the door, watching Elias's car disappear down the road, and felt something colder than fear settle in my chest. Not dread, not panic. Resolve. I turned to them. Listen to me. He came here because he's scared, because he knows the investigation is moving faster than he thought. He's losing control. Dad ran a hand through his hair. But he's right, isn't he? He'll point the finger at all of us. Yes, I said, And that's why we need to act before he can." Sienna sniffed. "What do we do?" I stepped into the center of the living room and looked at all three of them. "We tell the agents everything," I said. "Before Crestwell can rewrite history, before Elias can weaponize our silence, before anyone else shows up at this door." Mom nodded slowly. Dad exhaled, steadying himself. Sienna's voice shook. "Okay," I continued. "Every message, every document, every conversation with Elias or the CFO, every instinct you ignored, every lie you believed. All of it." Dad looked at me, something like fear and pride mingling in his expression. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "You deserve the truth," I said. "And we're running out of time." Mom wiped her eyes. "Will the agents protect us?" "I think so," I said softly, "but we need to give them something to protect." Sienna curled her legs under her. "I'll tell them everything." Dad nodded. "So will I." I moved to the window, watching the road, scanning the snowy path Elias had taken. He thought he could break us. He thought fear would silence us. He thought power could protect him. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I turned back to my family. "Tomorrow," I said, "we bring down Crestwell." And this time, no one disagreed. The house was still dark when I woke the next morning, the kind of heavy dawn light that makes everything look grainy and unreal. For a moment I lay there listening to the faint hum of the heater, the soft creak of the old floorboards, the familiar quiet of a home that had been peaceful once, before lies took root in its walls. I sat up, pulled on a sweater, and checked my phone. A message from Agent Ruiz arrived at 6:23 in the morning. "We're moving today. Be prepared for calls. Stay inside unless instructed otherwise." My pulse quickened, not with fear this time, but with the weight of what the day would bring. I slipped quietly out of bed and walked into the hallway. The smell of coffee drifted faintly from the kitchen. Dad was already up. He sat at the table, hunched over a stack of papers, reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. There were pages spread out before him, contract copies, old emails, the mortgage notice, evidence of the mistakes and trust that had brought us to this point. "You're up early," I said softly. He looked up, his eyes tired but clearer than I'd seen them in years. "Didn't sleep much," he said. "Your mother's still in bed. Sienna, too." I nodded, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat across from him. For a moment we just sat in silence, both knowing there were things to say but unsure how to begin. Dad exhaled slowly. "I keep thinking about all the choices that got us here. I can't decide if I was blind or just desperate." "Maybe a bit of both," I said gently. "But that doesn't make you alone. People trusted Crestwell. People trust people who smile and shake hands and speak with confidence." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Still doesn't make it hurt less." "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't." A soft knock sounded behind us, and Sienna walked in wearing one of Dad's old sweatshirts. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen from crying. "Is it happening today?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "They're moving on Crestwell, and likely on Elias." Sienna swallowed hard. "What about us?" "We're witnesses," I repeated, "as long as we tell them everything." She nodded slowly. "I will." Dad closed the folder in front of him. "What do you need from me today?" "Honesty," I said, "more than you've ever given anyone." He met my eyes, and something passed between us. An unspoken acknowledgement of the years lost, the fractured pieces that were finally starting to shift into place. Before either of us could say anything more, my phone rang. Unknown number. My pulse spiked. Dad watched me carefully. "Avery," I answered. "Hello?" "Ms. Langford," Agent Callahan said. "We're at Crestwell's downtown office now. Warrants are being executed. I suggest your family stays home for the next few hours. You may receive a call for follow-up." "Is it happening smoothly?" I asked. There was a beat of hesitation. For the moment carried a weight I didn't like. Is Elias there? I asked. No, Callahan said. We haven't located him yet. My chest tightened. Then you need to— Ms. Langford, he cut in gently. We're doing everything we can. Stay with your family. We'll update you soon. He hung up. I set the phone down slowly. Dad's eyes narrowed. What did he say? They can't find Elias. Sienna let out a shaky breath. Oh, God. Mom appeared in the doorway, her face pale. What do you mean they can't find him? I stood. It means we stay together. No one goes anywhere alone today. Dad pushed his chair back. I'll check the locks. Sienna moved closer. Avery, what if he comes here again? I wanted to say he wouldn't. I wanted to say he was too scared, too cornered, too watched. But I remembered that SUV, that crack of a window, the silhouette. I won't let him hurt you, I said. Not again. For the next hour, the house felt like a waiting room before a storm. Mom made tea. Sienna curled up under a blanket. Dad turned on the fireplace even though it wasn't cold enough yet. I checked my phone every few minutes, waiting for news. At 9:15, it came. A text from Agent Ruiz. He's on the move. Stay inside. I barely had time to show Dad when headlights swept across the front windows. A car, then another, then a third. Mom gasped. Dad stood up sharply. No, I said, they're unmarked. That's federal. A moment later, a firm knock rattled the front door. Dad opened it cautiously. 2 agents stood outside, Ruiz and Callahan. We need to secure your home, Callahan said calmly. May we come in? Dad stepped aside immediately. Ruiz approached me. We executed warrants at Crestwell. We have access to internal records, and everything you gave us matches what we found. Relief flickered in my chest, quick and fragile. Is Elias in custody? I asked. Not yet, she said, but we know where he's heading. I frowned. Where? Callahan stepped forward. Here. Mom gasped. Dad's jaw clenched. What does he want? Ruiz didn't sugarcoat it. To retrieve whatever evidence he thinks your daughter has. He's panicked, and panicked men make dangerous choices. A cold shiver moved down my spine. We're going to station 2 agents outside, she continued. 2 more will remain inside until we confirm he's been apprehended. Sienna's voice trembled. He wouldn't hurt us, would he? Ruiz answered plainly. He's desperate enough to try, and desperation can make anyone dangerous. Dad's fists tightened. What do we do? Stay put, Callahan said. Stay together, and let us handle the rest. The agents took their positions. The house felt different instantly. Still our home, but now something fortified. Guarded, waiting. Minutes passed like hours. The clock ticked loudly. The fire crackled. Every sound felt amplified. Then Agent Ruiz's earpiece crackled faintly. Her posture straightened. He's close, she said. My heart slammed against my ribs. Sienna pressed closer to Mom. Dad stepped in front of them both. Callahan moved toward the front door and cracked it open an inch. Visual confirmed, he said. Silver sedan, 1 occupant, plates obscured. Ruiz lowered her voice. Advise backup, target approaching. I stood frozen, barely breathing. Outside, gravel crunched under tires. A car door slammed, footsteps approached the porch. Then, a sharp command from outside. Hands up, federal agents! A man's voice, panicked and sharp. Don't touch me! Don't you dare! There was a scuffle, boots pounding. Someone yelled, someone cursed. Something heavy hit the ground. The front door shook as a body thudded against it. Mom whimpered. Callahan raised a hand. Stay back. More shouting outside. Then, finally, suspect in custody. Repeat, Elias Ford is in custody. The tension in my chest snapped like a rope pulled too tight for too long. Ruiz exhaled. It's over. Dad sagged into the nearest chair, face pale with relief. Sienna began sobbing into Mom's shoulder. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe fully. After a minute, Callahan stepped onto the porch. Ruiz followed, nodding for us to join them outside. I stepped out with Dad beside me. Elias was being walked toward a black SUV in handcuffs, his hair disheveled, his face twisted in a mix of rage and defeat. When he saw me, he stopped struggling long enough to smirk. "This isn't over," he spat. "You think you've won? You don't even know what Crestwell is capable of." I met his eyes steadily. "Crestwell's collapsing. You know it. And you know who helped take it down." His jaw tensed. "You're going to regret this." Dad stepped in front of me. "No, you are." An agent pushed Elias into the vehicle. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing him inside. Ruiz turned to us. "He'll be held without bail pending formal charges. With the evidence we have, it's unlikely he'll see daylight outside a courtroom for a long time." Dad ran a hand down his face, shaking his head. "I still can't believe any of this happened." "It did," I said. "But it ends today." Mom hugged me tightly. "You saved us, Avery. You saved all of us." Her voice cracked, and something inside me, something long-wounded, softened. Ruiz cleared her throat gently. "I'll need to speak with each of you later today for follow-up interviews. But for now, get some rest. You've all been through enough." We thanked them as the agents packed up. When they finally drove away, leaving the street quiet and untouched by anything except falling snow, the house seemed to breathe again. Dad turned to me. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't," I said. "You just start over. All of us do." Mom squeezed my hand. Sienna wiped her face, still shaken but stronger than she'd been the night before. The storm had broken. The threat was gone. But rebuilding, the healing, that would take time. As we stepped back inside, I paused at the doorway and glanced at the road where Elias had disappeared minutes earlier. His final words lingered in the back of my mind, not as a warning, but as a reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything. Then I closed the door, and for the first time in years, the house felt safe. Snow drifted in slow spirals past the kitchen window the morning after Elias was taken into custody, drifting so softly it felt like the sky was finally exhaling. The house was quiet, calm in a way it hadn't been in weeks. When I walked into the living room, Dad was already up, sitting on the sofa with a mug of coffee clasped in both hands. He looked older but lighter, as if some invisible weight had finally slipped off his shoulders. He glanced at me and offered a small smile. "I didn't think I'd sleep at all," he said. "But I did, straight through." "That's a good sign," I said, sinking into the chair across from him. "It feels like my mind finally shut down after running on fear for months," he admitted. "You know, I didn't realize how deep I'd gotten until I saw him in those handcuffs. It was like waking from a nightmare." I nodded. "A long one." He looked down at his mug. "I owe you everything." "You owe me honesty," I said gently. "Nothing more." Mom stepped out from the hallway, wrapped in her thick winter robe, her hair still mussed from sleep. She joined us quietly, sliding onto the couch next to Dad. She looked at me with eyes that carried years of understanding and regret. "When you warned us about him, I should have listened. A mother is supposed to look out for her children, not the other way around." "You didn't know," I said. "He fooled all of you." Mom reached out, placing her hand on mine. "We made you feel like an outsider, like your voice wasn't welcome, and because of that, we almost lost everything." I swallowed hard, feeling old wounds ease just an inch. "We're still here," I whispered. "We get to fix things now, together." Dad exhaled shakily. "Together," he echoed. We stayed like that for a while, the quiet between us no longer tense or cautious, just honest. A fragile kind of peace began to fill the room, the same way the light outside slowly softened the edges of everything it touched. Around noon, a soft knock sounded at the door. Sienna shuffled toward it, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. She opened it, and there stood Agent Ruiz, dusted in snow, her expression calm. "Good morning," she said. "May I come in?" Dad nodded quickly. Of course. Ruiz stepped inside and brushed snow off her coat. I won't keep you long, she said. I just wanted to give you an update. Elias was transferred to a secure federal facility overnight. He's already begun negotiating with prosecutors. Sienna stiffened. Negotiating? So he's going to try blaming us. Ruiz gave a faint, reassuring smile. He's blaming everyone, but he has no evidence to implicate you, and he knows it. I crossed my arms. What about Crestwell? Ruiz's expression turned firmer. The company will survive, but not in its current form. Several executives are already under investigation. You were right about the shell vendors and the offshore transfers. Dad closed his eyes as if absorbing a final blow. I should have known. She touched his arm gently. Mr. Langford, people like Elias build their power on being trusted. You weren't naive. You were targeted. He nodded, but I could see he wasn't ready to forgive himself. Ruiz turned to me. Ms. Langford, your testimony and documentation were essential. Without your timeline and the files you provided, this case might have taken months longer, months that could have given Elias time to disappear. I felt a knot loosen in my chest. I'm glad I did the right thing. You did more than that, she said. You protected your family, and you prevented Crestwell from burying a trail that could have hurt a lot of people. She glanced toward the window. I'll be in touch about next week's hearing, but as far as today goes, rest. You've earned it. When Ruiz left, the house felt even lighter, like the snow outside was cleansing everything, one quiet inch at a time. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside onto the porch, wrapped in a scarf and jacket. The cold bit at my cheeks, but it felt good, clean, honest. I watched the snow fall on the street, making everything look softer than it was yesterday. Dad joined me, hands in his coat pockets. You know, he said, I kept thinking strength was refusing help, refusing to admit mistakes. And now? I asked. He smiled faintly. Now I think strength is knowing when you're wrong and asking the right people for help. A tight breath escaped me. I'm glad you see that. He nodded, then looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen since I was a child. I'm sorry, Avery, for everything I ever made you carry alone. The apology landed so deep I felt something shift inside me, like a lock clicking open after years of rust. I accept it, I said quietly. And I forgive you. His eyes glistened. Thank you. We stood in silence, watching snow collect on the railing. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like we were standing on opposite sides of a chasm. Behind us, the front door opened. Sienna stepped out with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, handing one to me. She squeezed my hand. He's gone, she whispered. He can't hurt us anymore. No, I said. He can't. She looked into her mug. I've been thinking, maybe I should go back to school, or do something meaningful, not chase status the way he taught me to. I smiled. That sounds like a good plan. She nodded slowly. You were right about him. I'm sorry it took so long to see it. You see it now, I said. That's what matters. That evening, the 4 of us gathered in the living room with a fire crackling in the hearth. Mom brought out old photo albums, ones we hadn't looked at in years. Pictures of holidays before everything grew heavy with expectations. Pictures of lake trips, summer barbecues, first days of school. At one point, Dad handed me a small envelope. Inside was a deed. To the cabin, he said softly. It's yours now. It always should have been. A place to heal. A place to begin again. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he said. Just live a life that makes you proud. That night, as everyone drifted to bed, I stepped outside once more. The snow had stopped, leaving the world quiet and still. I watched the faint glow of the town below and wrapped my coat tighter. Some stories end with explosions or revelations or sudden victories. Mine ended with truth, with stillness, with a family learning how to become a family again. The storm hadn't destroyed us. It stripped us bare. It showed us who we were, who we had been, and who we could choose to be. And maybe that's what healing really is. I took a deep, steady breath and let the cold air fill my lungs. This was the first day of something new, a beginning, not perfect, not loud, but real. Before I go, if this story resonated with you, I'd love for you to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from, or if you've lived through something like this. And if you want more stories of resilience, truth, and the kind of quiet revenge that restores your spirit, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps this growing community more than you know. Thank you for being here. Now, ready for the next story?